We're good to go.
Right, we're all good. The whole world can see us, which is fantastic. So kia ora, well, welcome to the hearing for considering representation in the Ruapehu district. The formalities of using technology such as this creates modest challenges, but we are able, I think, to provide the sort of service and expectations that communities have in terms of the deliberation process. So before we proceed any further, it's fair and reasonable and actually very appropriate that we make acknowledgements to tangata whenua. And I am going to ask Commissioner Bigham to assist us in appropriate recognition, and then we'll open with a karakia and then we'll go into our introductions. So Commissioner Bigham, if you can take over from here, I'd be grateful.
Tēnā rā koutou, ko huhu mai nei tēnei ata I runga I te karanga o tēnei kaupapa e pāna ki te representation review mō te kaunihira o Ruapehu nō reira. Ki te tukumihi atu tēnei uri o ngā ruahine me te atiawa ki a koutou, e noho ana I te pito o te motu, nui te mihi ki a koe, me Don, me o whanaunga o kaimahi e noho ana I o ki tō taha, e whakaaro hoki ki ngā iwi, me ngā hapu, me ngā whānau o tō rohe, nui te mihi, nui te aroha, nui te manaakitanga ki runga I a rātou nō reira. Mai tātou o te kaunihira, o te kōmihana o te rohe o Aotearoa ki a koutou, nui te mihi, nui te aroha, ka nui te whakaaro mō tēnei kaupapa, tēnā rā koutou katoa. Just a brief mihi to you all, Mayor Don and your associates sitting with you today in your chamber, and mihi to all the whānau, all the hapu and all the iwi of the rohe that you serve. I know there are numerous whānau to be acknowledged there, so rather than try to get too specific, we acknowledge everyone who has whakapapa links to your rohe, and thank you for being available for us today. Our karakia that starts our day, which you are more than welcome to join us, which is listed on the documentation, is whakataka te hau. Whakataka te hau ki te uru, whakataka te hau ki te tonga. Kia mā kina kina ki uta, kia mā tara tara ki tai. Kia hi ake ana te a tākura, he tio, he huka, he hau hu, ti hei, mauri ora. Kia ora, Brendan. Kia ora tātou.
Kia ora, Benita, and thank you. So just to carry out the introductions before we go into the detail, you'll be able to see on the screen 3 commissioners and 3 officials from the Commission. So I'll just ask each of the commissioners to introduce themselves as part of our formalities, and given that Commissioner Bigham has just opened proceedings, I'll ask her to introduce herself, and then we'll go through to Commissioner Anea.
Kia ora team, I'm Bonita Bigham. I'm currently a Community Board member for the Taranaki Coastal Community Board within the South Taranaki District Council, Rohe. I also have the pleasure of serving with Don on National Council for LGNZ, and I've been a part of the Commission for just over 6 months now. Kia ora.
Kia ora everyone, great to be with you today. My name is Janie Anea, and some of you I know do know me, and I was previously a mayor of the Timaru district for 9 years, 9 years as a councillor, and I've had 7 years as a local government commissioner. Thank you.
Janie. And I'm Brendan Duffy, with the privilege of chair of the Commission, spent a bit of time as mayor of Ruapehu, and a bit of local government stuff around the country. So I suppose the message is that between the 3 commissioners, there's a level of experience and understanding of that, which is important when it comes to representation. So hopefully that gives some credibility to the decision-making process. Also on the screen, we've got representatives, as I said, from the Commission. So EJ Ruthven is with us today, our senior advisor. We've got Donald Rezabos, who's our long-standing principal advisor, and Penny Langley, our CEO. So they're spread around the country, as you can probably imagine, and we're all here virtually today to engage in a very important part of the principles of democracy. Don, Mayor Don, I'd like to pass over to you if you could introduce your team, and then we can kick into the proceeding.
Thank you very much, Brendan. Look, tēnā koutou katoa, tēnā aho e koramatua o te kanahira orohi o Ruapehu, ko Don Cameron toku ingoa. Look, ka mihi mahana kia koutou katoa, tēnā koutou katoa. So a warm welcome to the local government commissioners, to the Zoom, to councillors and staff on the Zoom, and to submitters. On my right is our CEO, Clive Manley.
Kia ora.
On my left, Pauline Welsh is the person who's done most of the hard work for us. We also have over here, introduce yourself. Oh, can you see? Can you see?
No, Candice can't be seen.
Oh, you introduced Candice and me. Okay,
yes.
team.
Sorry, and Candice being not sitting as our minute writer and action keeper.
Yeah, thank you. And in the background, we've got Gavin. And also Gavin, ex-commissioner, who has been helping us with our review.
Perfect. Kia ora, Gavin.
Kia ora.
Okay, so thank you for the introduction. So the process is pretty straightforward, where you, the council, have the opportunity to present your perspectives. Commissioners will want to ask some questions and seek points of clarity. We'll then go through to the submitters, those individuals that have already been identified. As those submitters present, we as commissioners may want points of clarity. So we'll identify questions that can be considered by you and your team and then responded to in the right of reply, just so we can get as much information as possible to help us in the deliberations that we've got in front of us. So without further ado, Mayor Don, will pass to you and look forward to your observations.
Thank you very much, Brendan. Look, the Ruapehu district is a large district, 6,370 square kilometres, has 9 towns or communities, is rural in character with a population of around 13,000, and Māori represent around 47% of the population. The genesis of our representation review was some 6 years ago when we met with our Māori council to discuss Māori wards, with advice from Kamata as well. A decision was made not to proceed with Māori wards at the time, and this was partly due to the public reaction to the establishing wards in New Plymouth, and also the tight time frame to promote wards across the district with iwi Māori. But Māori wards from then on was a live topic. For this review, we began our engagement hui in April 2021. In August, we held hui in Marae North and South of the district. And following these hui, Council resolved to include Māori wards and maintain the Māori Council as well. And with the knowledge that the members of the Māori Council wanted to change its focus to support Māori ward councillors. Hobson's Pledge members visited the district soon after this decision, but gained little traction. With 2 to 3 Māori ward members, the discussion was then centred around the number of councillors to achieve a spread across the district for both urban and rural, and the role and number of community boards. The discussion regarding boards was a complete turnaround from previous reviews, where the very existence of boards had been debated. But for this review, discussion was centred around not only retaining the boards, but also making them more effective. And this included replacing the Tāmari ward of councillors with an elected board. The decision around the number of councillors followed wide-ranging discussion, taking into account the likely future of local government, more centred around localism and strategic planning. And this includes working with NGOs, maintaining effective relationships with government departments, maintaining our strong regional relationship, which has served us well over the past 7 years, and building upon our relationships with iwi Māori. This is rapidly developing as Māori are also partners in civil defence, including the COVID response, climate change and the environment. Te Awa Tupua is a leader in this, as well as relationships with each iwi. Ruapehu has been working through a detailed community-based livability study using both data and verbal evidence to marry the two. This study will undoubtedly form the basis of the development of each of our communities, which in turn will inform decision-making and understanding of the needs of our community. Thus, the rationale for the initial proposal was made was, first of all, for more effective and efficient governance, a strategic approach to governance by council, balanced by community placemaking by the community boards, additional Māori seats leading to a reduction in number of general seats, and the current ward boundaries did not work for the smaller number of general seats. The reasons for the change to the final proposal to change from at-large to north-south wards, the number of submissions we received not wanting the at-large system was large. The size of the district was very difficult for candidates to know and understand the entire district and communities. With a large number of smaller communities, it was very costly for candidates to visit and put up election signs and the time required to do this. As a mayor, I can tell you it took me 3 months to get around this district prior to an election. This would put off, and the problem we saw, would put off prospective candidates. So to determine a north-south split would be more beneficial and effective. The ward boundary was left at the current National Park Tomori ward boundary, so there's no change there. The change of joining Waimarina Waiuru and National Park as one ward and Ohura Tomori as the other was not considered large or very hard to understand by our ratepayers. Now, the reasons for the change in the final proposal on community boards, in which was proposed 4 and ended up with 3, the community was virtually silent on the introduction of an Ohura community board, which was the 4th one. The current joining of Ohura and Tomori wards into the ward committee has worked well over the past 9 years, and the 2 elected members on that have done a great job in making sure that those rural voices are heard. A new elected community board for Tomori Ohura gives the rural community more voice than it currently has. The reasons for the change in numbers of general seats in the final proposal came from social media comments and feedback from the community, which were considered. These comments spoke in overwhelming numbers in favour of retaining current council numbers, if we were considering reducing numbers to do so by less. And the feeling of some councils that in 8 general and 3 Māori seats would give more diversity and opportunity for a greater number of viewpoints. So with the background described, there's a real pressure on staff to provide the information required to check boundaries, mesh blocks, communities of interest, and to anticipate any likely submissions against the final proposal. Council was satisfied the final proposal reflects the process and the submissions. I'd also add that councillors expressed their thanks to the staff and Clive for the depth and detail of information provided. That in itself, I guess, is unusual for some councils. So yes, we believe we have spent a lot of time, more time than usual, over review and considered as many options as possible. And as I said, it did put a lot of pressure on staff, but at the same time, council felt that they had enough information to go to the final proposal. So thank you.
Brilliant, thank you, Mayor Don. Can I just, I neglected at the start and I do it every hearing and I apologise. If you see commissioners with their heads down, they're not falling asleep, we're just writing notes. So just needed to say that, otherwise I'll get told off at morning tea time for not mentioning it. Rightio, so we've got an overall perspective from that summary. Now's not. And of course, you'll appreciate that we're working from multiple screens and bits of paper here. So I always feel uncomfortable about where our heads are going and not sort of keeping a close eye on you, but I think you'll understand. There'll be questions from commissioners now, and I'm just very happy to let that flow and see where we land. Whoever wishes to kick off.
Yeah. Technical problems.
Commissioner Bigham, are you ready?
Hi, kia ora, sorry, just trying to coordinate my eyes with my finger with the screen. It's a bit challenging, so aroha mai. Kia ora me, Don, thank you for the summary. Just interested in the council's the council's thinking around the final decision, and if the consideration, just from my reading, if the consideration for efficiency may have overtaken the effectiveness aspect of the equation in terms of the Māori ward representation, when you had such strong feedback from your community. What was the council's thinking about the final numbers that you did? What was the final rationale despite the feedback you've had from the community?
Yep. Look, as you know, we went out with a proposal of 2 Māori ward seats. Very quickly, it was agreed on 3. And obviously we've got a submitter around 4. But we felt comfortable with that, and particularly with the number of people on the Māori roll. But I think more than that, though, is a slight complication that we've decided to keep the Māori council. And the feeling is that we feel that the Māori ward members will need support in council with the Māori council. The Māori council itself is going to change its tack on quite considerably. They're already thinking about their strategy and how they're going to support going forward. Also, the other factor within this is that we have 2 of 5 iwi have settled, 3 are settling. And we're finding that from a council point of view, it's becoming more and more work involved in dealing and talking with Māori representation, both at iwi level and also at hapu level, I have to say. On top of that, we've got Te Awa Tupua, and now we've got the regional Māori grouping with Te Ranga Tupua, which we're now working with. So from that point of view, it has become, I guess Clive may want to add to this, our work, particularly around Māori, is increasing dramatically. Am I concerned? I'm not absolutely concerned, because I think it's a natural progression. Clive, have you got anything you want to add to that?
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, so ko-Clive Mandia Hau, that we've actually increased our resources internally as well, to cope with the extra demand. When I say demand, that implies it's an imposition. We welcome it. It is the way we work. So we've looked at it both from a governance and a management capacity point of view in this proposal. So we're confident that the numbers that are there will make a difference to us and support it internally as well.
Have we answered your question, Peter? I'm not sure we have. Okay, kia ora, thank you.
So, Janie, Commissioner Anea?
I guess from what you just said then about having to work more fully with Māori and more of your time spent. So I just wondered why having more Māori on your council wouldn't be of great help. And I'm talking about some of the submitters who have said that they would have preferred to have 4.
Thank you, Mayor Don. Just in terms of process, I'd just like to talk about how we came through this. We during the meeting where we were talking about the final arrangements, the general feel was that we were going to increase the Māori representative from 2 to 3. Then the conversation during the meeting was around the number of general representatives on the council, and in some ways that conversation took over the entire debate, and we didn't turn around and revisit the final number. So even though we increased it to 3, there was no one actually brought up during the discussion increasing it again to 4. So that's how the process worked. So there was no real discussion around why we did not increase it to 4 during that meeting. We had already decided, well, there's a lot of talk around increasing it from the 2 to 3 when we had the 6 general, and that was, of course, the amount we could have with 6 general. But then the discussion morphed into, let's move it up to 8 general, but we didn't revisit the fact that there could have been up to 4 Māori representatives at that stage.
if I could add to that as well, I think the overarching proposal was to look at what does council do versus placemaking in the communities. So there was a desire to, instead of having ward committees or having council as it does at the moment, doing a lot of local decisions, it was reducing the size of the governance in council, but increasing the numbers in the community board. So, and also retaining the Murray Council to ensure that we've actually got more people on the ground working with our communities than council. So it was a deliberate intention to reduce the size of central government, but to increase the actual people closest to the community. So that was why the number, it wasn't efficiency, because there's no such thing as efficiency in governance in that sense. It was more a case of letting the focus go locally rather than centrally.
Okay. Commissioner Neer, you done?
I guess I am. I'm still struggling a little with that, the fact that you didn't discuss it. I would have thought that that was a great opportunity, because if you, from what and correct me if I'm wrong, EJ, but it could have been 8-4, couldn't it? So you would have reduced the general ward, but been able to increase the representation in the Māori ward. So I am still a little confused on that issue. Thank you.
Sorry, if I could add a little bit on that. I think the key thing is Maori wards do not resolve, it's not iwi representation. Those, whether it's 3 or 2, 3 or 4, will not represent iwi in the district. They will be representing Maori and they'll be elected because of that. So again, it was part of that discussion was to increase from 2 to 3, but the actual total number was not seen as a greater democracy, if you like, because we have 7 iwi that would be vying for whatever number of seats we have. And that's why some of the submissions was we should have equal representation, but obviously we're not allowed, in the Electoral Act to be able to do that, but that's where they would have liked to have gone.
Thank you.
Through the chair, may I just add a comment to that? The discussion going right back to all through our various meetings and everything was that to reduce the overall number of councillors on the council. So one of the discussion points at the final hearings, deliberations, was that by going 8-3, we were going back to our 11 plus the mayor that we currently had, and there was rightly or wrongly, there was no desire to increase it to 12 plus the mayor at that stage.
Okay. I've got a similar question around the number, so I'm not sure there's any point in repeating it again. I suppose I'm just trying to get a sense of, and it was articulated, Medon, through your presentation, that you had the sense where you saw the community boards as potentially being significant participants in the governance of your community, and seemingly there's been quite some pushback on the model that you originally went out with, and it's now reverted to similar or same number as you've historically had, but obviously you're getting the increase in the Maori seats. So
Sorry.
in that process, do you feel there was I hate to use the word breakdown, but did something not quite go right in the original, when you originally went out?
No, I think the big change in this is how we view the community boards. Because we're doing this livability study, which has been going on for 3 years now, and it's really around going right back down to community level. So we're collecting a huge amount of data within our community, but we're also marrying that with stories from people in their communities. And I'm talking of hundreds, I'm not talking just a few people. And that's given us a view of the future, I think, of local government, particularly for rural areas anyway. And from that, we got a view, first of all, so we need people at that ground level, and that is the community boards. And they have not been given much power or delegation in the past. As you know, 12 years ago, I believe, we actually tried to get rid of them and was severely stamped on. Our view is we've got community boards, let's use them and let's give them some delegation and even some budget. But let's make sure that they're connected to our communities, even closer than they are now. And with that, we felt that there is now an opportunity for everyone now to be part of that Māori and Pākehā, to be part of community boards, and which in the past has only been taken up by Pākehā. There's been very few Māori. We've now got, I think, one in the south plus 2 councillors. So we're seeing a resurgence, I guess, of Māori taking an interest in local government. And I think that actually did also slightly influence how we were going forward with Māori wards. Our feeling is that we actually want to go out to encourage more Māori to stand for community boards and to stand for council, rather than Māori wards. Because Māori wards, with as we say, with up to 7 iwi, who do they represent? Even if it's 2, 3, or 4. That was also part of the discussion. So yeah, in the end, it came up trying to balance it so that we can, A, first of all, acknowledge Māori representation, B, acknowledge community representation around our community boards, and then making sure that council takes a far more strategic approach than we have in the past.
Okay. Can I just ask a question on there's 2 questions actually. The first question is in terms of the livability study that you're working on at the moment. Are you comfortable that what you've finally proposed will support that piece of work that you've been on for the last 3 years? You're feeling comfortable about that?
I think, yes, we are, Brennan. Sorry, Chair. Yes, we are.
Right.
We've taken our time around this. We've just started to release some data, and we're using .love's data as well. So we're drilling, I have to say, into very high detail. So we have to be very careful what we're doing. But we've started with our local iwi and with NGOs and with Ministry of Social Development and Ministry of Education. We've just started releasing some of that data. Yeah. We've got to be careful we're not delving into privacy issues. So far, we think that from the reaction we're getting is that this is something that's not been done before, and we've got finding government departments are very interested in joining with us. So, yeah, we think we are prepared for it.
Okay.
It's going to take a very different view. It's going to, council are going to have to take a quite different view towards their communities once they start looking at the data that's coming forward.
Okay. Now on the at large, the 2 wards, the north-south split, what's the risks with that?
Well, look, can I say that Mayor is the only person that is at large at the moment. And as I said, for me, prior to every election, I start 3 months before an election to start getting around the district. So you're sort of looking at, doing 300 plus kilometres north-south, covering 6,700 square kilometres. We've got 9 communities, plus you've got small rural communities. It wouldn't be unusual for you to attend, I don't know, 12 meetings in which you might only have 6 people coming to them. But they've asked you to come along because it's out at Waimiha or Ongarui or somewhere like that. For councillors, that is asking too much if you've got a full-time job as well, and you decide I want to become a councillor. To get across the district is almost impossible. The cost also, if you want to put up signs, things like that, you're looking well over $10,000.
Yeah, I suppose my point, I wasn't so much focusing on standing to get elected, I was more on the representation side of it. You've got the north-south split, you've got the livability study, you've got localism, good representation, all that sort of, So is there any so is there a downside to just halving it?
Well, we didn't think so, simply because the one of the worries was if it's all at large, you could have, for instance, the largest area like Tomarui putting up 12 candidates and people voting for them, and only 1 or 2 or 3 candidates from down south. That was raised. It has happened in the past too. The other point, Chair, is that the north-south split, as we keep saying, is really no longer apparent in council. It was some years ago. There was definitely north and south. That has virtually disappeared, and it's as Ruapehu is developing as a district, not as a town by town. I don't know, Clive. Clive has probably have a different view because he sees it probably a little bit more than I do, a different way than I do.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. First of all, I'd comment I think the issue of at large or per ward was they didn't really trust the whole proportional, your 1, 2, 3 voting would resolve those issues. We were confident at a staff level that you wouldn't get a dominance of Tomarui or Okuni in the system, that the system would work. But I think it's fair to say the community didn't really have that confidence, so it preferred to have the kind of a north-south split. We didn't want to go to a total, even more wards, but it was one step too far for them. They haven't had enough experience with how the system works. So I think really with the whole of our proposal, it's worth keeping in mind that we were deliberately trying to reduce the centre and increase the placemaking, which fits in with the whole livability, and Maori seats were seen as part of that. So it was really one step too far to increase the governance in both centre and in the boards. We are a small population district. We're very large in geography, but in numbers we're not that large. So increasing the total number was actually a big step for us. So that's why whether we go to 2, 3, 4 Maori seats, to increase the size of council would have been really too far for us to go. So that's why ideally we went with 2, but moving to 3 was the right thing to do. But to go to 4 would have really gone against the whole proposal we're doing. So I think that livability really helps us focus on our individual communities. We're not the same, we're a diverse community, even though we're rural, we're still diverse, and we wanted to be able to respond that with community boards. And the centre, like even our bylaws now, we have variances on even how we do our dog policy is different in Tomarui as it is in Okuni. Our communities are different, and we wanted our local boards to be able to reflect that and keep the centre as, not as small as possible, but certainly not increase it.
Through the chair, could I just add a couple of comments there? During the whole process, we started off understanding that both the National Park Ward and the Ohura Ward would no longer be able to be viable under the 10% rule, given the fact that we were, unless of course we kept 11 general seats and added the Maori seats on top, which would have been a big increase in our council. So we were looking at, and National Park Ward was very, very much on the borderline of meeting the 10% rule anyway, even under the 11 general seats. So right from the beginning, we were looking at a different ward structure, and the questions, and we went through a process of looking at quite a lot of options around how this could all work, including urban rural splits, and and then at large, and then at the 2 wards structure, which was probably the only structure, either at large or 2 wards, that would meet the 10% plus or minus criteria. So we did go through a lot of discussion around ward structure.
I think the other thing too, Chair and members, is that there has been a feeling that rural representation has dropped off over time, particularly at our board level, where our boards were dominated by rural and now dominated by urban. And we were trying to also balance numbers to make rural people want to be part, again, of local government, which is why we're changing Tomarui from a ward to a board, and that allows the new elected members, and I'm sure we will get a lot of rural people wanting to be part of that. Yeah. So that was also part of quite a large part of the discussion as well. We felt that balance had not been, was coming out of balance. Yeah.
Okay, just go back to Commissioner Anea.
I'll just put my hand down. Go. Just following from that discussion about the wards and the importance and the fact you were worried that maybe all of the potential councillors could come from one area, but you've decided to go for one ward for the Māori representation. So are there risks there? Are the same risks that you thought about in bringing in 2 wards? Are they relevant for the Māori ward as well?
Yeah, no, thank you. I think basically the hui that we had on the wards was, it was pretty well unanimous to keep it at large. There was, because of the iwi rohi, it's impossible to match tribal affiliations with a ward system. So they believe, you know, it would be less desirable if we attempted to. So it was certainly looked at, but it was discontinued, you know, it was discounted very early on, and at large was what basically unanimously was asked for, which is what we responded to.
I mean, you very correctly pointed out that Māori representation isn't of the mana whenua, but actually of the Māori.
Yeah.
And so I just wondered if there was the same risk with populations of Māori being centred in certain areas.
Yeah, again, through the actual Māori role it's not been widely used, because obviously it wasn't envisaged when people decided to go on Māori role or the general role. They didn't know that this would impact their ability to vote at local body level. So I think you'll need another census to help the community work out how they want to vote, where they want to vote. So at the moment, the spread of Maori on Maori roll, I don't necessarily was thought of from a voting for local government. So again, at large is probably the fairest way to start with. 6 years from now, it may be different. Once you've had another census, then people could have made some decisions on that. But I think at this stage, on balance, the at large was the best for Maori people voting. But that's for them to speak, not for me, but that was what they reflected to us.
Yes.
Can I just ask another question on the community boards? One of the, sorry, Commissioner Bigham, I didn't see your hand. You go first.
Kia ora, Mr. Chair. I actually had a community board question as well, if I may.
Yeah.
Around the different numbers for the different community boards. Was that an attempt to meet the plus or minus 10% kind of rules, or what was the rationale for the different numbers there? And also with that, when you talk about plus one appointed member per community board, how would that work be rationed out amongst your councillors, and does that include Māori ward appointees to those community boards as well? Just looking for the equity of the workloads, I guess.
Through the chair, the different numbers on the community boards was from the submissions from community board and other people in the community. So it was strongly following what the submission said in terms of those numbers. So no, there was no 10% rule being taken into account for those. Second question was, sorry. While it is up to the next council to make the appointments, that was our desire for it to be one, and that would be entirely up to the new council who sat on those boards.
If I could add to that as well, it was deliberate to only have one representative appointed to the board, because again, we didn't want it dominated by councillors. At the moment, some of our wards, you can have 4 councillors present, not all necessary with voting, but it's a purely viewpoint, but you could say that councillors were dominating some of those local issues, and we wanted to empower the local boards and the community board members to, if you like, to be in that decision making for their communities. So it was deliberate to reduce the appointments. Whether that's a Murray seat or not, that's, as you say, is for council to decide. But regardless, we didn't want the centre dominating the local decision making, unless it was desirable.
Okay, I think we've had a pretty good go. I think commissioners are comfortable with what we've received so far. So thank you for giving us that overview and for allowing us to delve into questions. We'll move now to the first of those who've chosen the opportunity or sought the opportunity to speak. So we'll go back to our CEO, who will activate the correct buttons.
Thanks, Brendan. Fiona is here with us. I'll just bring her into the meeting now.
And for commissioners, if you go to page 32, you'll find Fiona's submission.
So I think Fiona is here, and with a little bit of luck, in a moment or two, she'll be able to take herself off mute and pop on video if that's an option.
Kia ora, Fiona.
Tēnā koe, tēnā koutou.
Fiona, you've been observing so far. You've seen the proceedings.
Aye.
Fantastic. Right. Well, welcome, and we're in your hands.
Kia ora. Te mea tuatahi mihi nui kia Commissioner Benita mō tō karakia I tēnei hui. Nā karauna hoki, koutou hoki, mihi nui kia koutou. I am a woman of many bloodlines connected to my mountains and the rivers and the land. My strongest ties are to my father's ancestors who lived in Mokai Pātia near Taihape, and those of my mother's ancestors who paddled the upper reaches of the Wanganui and the Whakapapa rivers, Tauponui Aotea, and of course, Te Taurawhiri Ahinanako. I want to acknowledge my elders, past and present, who have fought for the rights and lives of our people in Taumaranui, the upper reaches of the Wanganui River and Ruapehu. I should not need to repeat their stories, the stories of our people. They have been said 1,000 times, and they are similar to many tribes and hapu and whānau of Aotearoa. I will say, though, that my people are still suffering, living in poor housing, struggling with low-paying jobs or reliant on benefits. The income of Māori has decreased in the past 7 years, and our housing crisis is beyond a crisis. I work tirelessly for my kuia, who have worked a lifetime on trying to help our hapu and all people of our rohe. They often sit on our paipai alone, worrying about the situation we are in. They have sent me here as their māngai, their voice in your domain, alien to them. My kuia know that our community is short on leaders and decision makers. Uncle Archie Tairoa has passed and his 2020 vision has yet to be reached. We know that we need Māori to lead our mokopuna and create spaces and places for us to begin to heal, to thrive, and to end our struggle. While inequity gaps widen, we all need to work harder at reducing and removing equity barriers. So firstly, we have to, that's you, me, councillors, government leaders of this country and our community members as a whole, recognise that we all have a raft of problems in communities like mine, communities like Taumaranui and the Ruapehu district, where the inequity gap is strengthened by decisions made by those that sit at the table of institutions such as Ruapehu District Council, and when they base reforms or policies on the health and wealth of that institution itself, and not on the health and wealth of the people they have pledged their service. I have sent this commission several documents to show you some of the journey that we have traversed with Ruapehu District Council regarding their engagement, their communities of interest, to encourage better and authentic engagement with Māori about Māori representation and ways which we think they can better serve the Māori community and perhaps work towards achieving better outcomes for our entire community through an equity-based approach. Sadly, all of our mahi seems to have been in vain and a waste of my kuia's time as well as mine, as at the end of it, I find myself standing or sitting before this commission, totally unsatisfied and disillusioned by a process and a system so flawed, racist and biased that it is no wonder Ruapehu District Council could only end up with a representation review decision that has little to no use or benefit for Māori. You see, we spent well over a year engaging and talking to Ruapehu District Council, only to find they never heard a word we said. They served us up a plate of porridge that no one in this community was willing to eat. You see, they shrunk us, they minimised our right to represent our people and expected us to be grateful for the rotten breakfast or sludge. Māori are far past swallowing rotten rules thought up of and enforced by oppressive decision makers. We warned Ruapehu District Council that unauthentic engagement labelled as community hui will be criticised as cultural appropriation and tick boxing if their final decision hasn't in some part recognised the input of our people. But still, they decided to dish us up a minimised representation, a new council of 8, taming the Māori voice to 2 and expecting us to be grateful, to which we will never be while the karanga of our kuia is not heard. And while they wasted their time and ours delivering their minimised council of 8 plus the mayor, we lost the opportunity for Māori and this community to possibly consider 4 Māori wards, or to consider how having an equitable council chamber would indeed be a step towards healing this community of Ruapehu, where all of its people can begin to live a better life instead of a privileged few. Still, there are the ones that scratch their balding heads and wonder why Māori are not doing better, or why Fiona seems to be doing okay, or their friend Hone or Marama down the road. And although I'm sick of having to explain the obvious to them, I will for the sake of this hearing. You see, Fiona, Marama and Hone are doing okay because we have learnt the Pākehā system and benefited from that. But far too many of my whanaunga cannot and should not have to squirm in a lifestyle and a process that isn't really a life. We are Māori and we are proud of it. We want our kids to be proud of it too, and their kids as well. But the only way forward is for decision makers to make equitable decisions for a community like Taumaranui, is to have more Māori at the table. Communities like Taumaranui, which has a Māori population of 56%, like Ruapehu, which has a Māori population of 64%, where 80% of Taumaranui high school students are Māori, then equity needs to be sought and found for Māori to do well. The same approach, an equity approach, needs to be delivered at council level and at every level, else our system continues to colonise tangata whenua, and no treaty partner wants that, right? Nō reira, mihi nui ki a koutou, tēnā koutou katoa.
Kia ora. Sorry, kia ora, Fiona. Commissioner Bigham.
Ai, tīna rā koe, Fiona nui te mihi kia koe I tēnei ata. Nā we whakamārama kia mātou hia hanga ngā mamaitanga o koutou o tēnā rohe nō reira tēnā koe. Just mihi to Fiona this morning for helping us to understand some of the mamae, some of the pain and hurt that sits with you and your whānau there in your rohe. So nui te mihi kia koe. Fiona, you talked about the things that council didn't do in terms of consulting and engaging with the Māori community. Can you describe what council could have or should have done better in that engagement process to help iwi Māori understand this representation review process?
I attended all of the hui held at Marae that the council did have, and that's one thing they did do well. However, everyone was sidelined by the fact that they came out with offering 2 Māori wards and with the possibility of 3. So the majority, of course, went for 3 and never got to consider the possibility of having 4. So I think their initial proposal sidelined the fact that we could actually find a more equitable approach for Māori.
So for having 4 Māori wards was never ever part of the conversation, or the relative numbers for representation was never discussed at any of those hui?
At the initial hui, before they came out with their initial proposal, it was discussed. It was discussed at even in the Māori Council, the Ruapehu Māori Council. It was discussed within our own hui, but it was never put out. Was that me? Sorry. It was never put out to the general public to consider.
Ka pai. Kia ora, Hua, thank you.
Kia ora.
Fiona, just in the space of Māori representation, is it your anticipation that Māori elected members would only have an interest in Māori issues, or would they have a district-wide interest?
Māori perspective have a worldview. We have a long-term worldview, and so it's way past even a 3 years. We have well past our own lifetime, and we have, for example, my mokopuna aren't just my grandchildren from my child. So we think of everybody. So that it's not just a Māori view, it's just how we view things. I think is termed as a Māori worldview is widespread and incorporates everybody and everything.
The reason I asked the question, then I'll put it back through to Mayor Don and write a reply, but one of the observations, and I just can't remember whether you said it or whether CEO Clive said it, but I got a sense that there was a perception that Māori ward representation would just be Māori, and I'm interested in Fiona's response, which is what I expected it to be, as to whether that is the perception that Māori ward representation would only be specific Māori related, rather than elected members of the local authority responsible for everything in the rohe. So I'm just interested to get a perspective on that and the right of reply. You still got your hand up, Commissioner Bigger, or are you done? You're done?
No, I just a bit, pulling that whakaaro out a little bit around the discussions around the 4 wards. So Fiona, do you feel that people are then feeling like you have to settle for the 3 because it's the best deal that you're going to get? Is that the sense I'm getting? That's
exactly how they felt at the hui, is like, oh no, we don't want 2, we'll have 3, but they never got the opportunity to discuss 4. Yeah, it was more of a settling. Yeah.
Ka pai, kia ora.
Commissioner Anea.
Kia ora, thank you so much for coming this morning. We really appreciate it. So I'm just interested to know what you think about the Māori ward being at large?
I think Māori have the ability to think for everybody. It doesn't matter if they're Māori or non-Māori, whether they're Chinese or whether they're 3-year-olds or 100-year-olds. We think about everybody and everything. It's the same as our awa, is the same as my grandmother. So Māori have the ability to be at large. But this is sort of, in this sort of system, it's waters that we have never swum. So it's difficult for Māori to know because we haven't done that. But my expectation is that Māori will do well because we have this open eyes, open ears, and consider everybody and everything.
Thank you.
Okay, I think we've done there, Fiona, but I do want to place on record that you sent additional information that was received by us last week. I want to assure you that we've read it all. As you presented this morning, you articulated that which we had read. And I also want to acknowledge clearly the commitment that you have and the dedication you have in your community. It's very obvious that you are deeply involved and deeply respected, and I just want to acknowledge that.
Nā mihi. Tēnā koutou katoa.
Tēnā koe, Fiona.
We'll move to the next presentation, Penny. So Peter Zimmer on page 36, Commissioners.
Thanks, Brendan. I will just bring Peter into the meeting with us now. So I believe Peter is here with us now, and in due course he will turn on the video. Excellent, there we go. We can see you, Peter, and you're unmuted. So Brendan, over to you.
Got it, Peter, welcome. You've been watching proceedings so far?
Yes, I have.
Fantastic. Okay, so you've seen how it all goes. So we're in your hands for you to articulate your observations, and obviously you know that we've received your copy of your submission.
Okay, yeah. So I'll just start. Kia ora. Hello and good morning. That is the Local Government Commission, the commissioners and the staff that are present in this meeting, and Mayor Don, Clive, Pauline and the RDC staff, and there's no doubt some elected councillors, representatives watching. Thank you for the time and the opportunity to participate in the review process. This is my first time that I'm involved in this democratic process. I want to declare that I'm the current chair of the National Park Community Board. That wasn't in any of my papers, but my objection or appeal was actually as an individual. Yeah, I'll take my, you mentioned, I'll take my submission as read. And if there is a time limit, can you just give me sort of a couple of minutes? I've only got a page and a half of notes. Okay, I'll just start. There were 4 pages that I put in, and I put and some of the points that had a recurring theme and are interrelated. I put a lot of thinking and looking at maps. I looked at the info and the submissions at the time, so I won't repeat what I wrote blow by blow. I will highlight the important points or the shortcomings as I see them. I believe the proposal was that came forward was very well considered and a thought through package that fitted together really well. There was a lot of blocks that seemed to fit together. It is progressive and it is forward looking, future focused. Representation across the district with no boundaries, and add in or bring in overdue Māori representation. Reducing the number of councillors to focus on district issues and governance, and as a result become a more effective and nimble, increase the community board representation, and delegated powers to get work done and to be closer to communities of interest. That's all very good. And however, if you take one away and that model, or as it was proposed, doesn't fit any longer. In my opinion, the interpretation of the feedback received and I was listening to all the speakers at the hearings, I read all the submissions. There is no compelling case or feedback that warrants to create a north-south ward and increase numbers of general councillors from the proposed 8 to 11. That goes with what was proposed to become more nimble. It was not part of the original proposal. The feedback received does not justify the major change from the original proposal. The current proposal, and especially the 4-4 even split between North and South into 2 general boards, is totally artificial and won't help us to a united district. It totally disregards existing and established communities of interest, and it has the potential to create frustration and resentment amongst those affected communities. Elections for councillors at large, and I mean, Mayor Don sort of got into a little bit of the North-South history, but I believe elections for councillors at large will go a long way to bury any remaining perceived or real differences between North and South that stem back to the 1989 of memory territorial review and boundary changes, which created the Ruapehu district in its current form. I'm a firm believer that we should move forward as one district. Farming and tourism are the cornerstones of the district. They feature strongly across the whole district, and not just in the north or the south, they're also in the west. This is another argument to be represented by one council at large, and then let the community boards deal with the specific local issue, give the community boards a few more teeth. So I'd like to say, let's elect the 6 willing to serve the whole district as general representatives across the Rohe district. I mean, I'd like to compare it. We do not elect 7.5 All Blacks from the North Island and 7.5 All Blacks from the South Island. We select the 15 best All Blacks regardless where they come from, and that should apply for the district, the Ruapehu district as well. It's really important that people that put their hand up, they understand they're actually representing the district and all the people and the issues and the challenges and the opportunities that are in the district and not a personal agenda. Maybe that's wishful thinking. And I've got the question, if elections at large are acceptable for the Maori ward, why are they not acceptable for the general ward? It just creates more confusion that residents need to understand the difference and why that is. Just keep it simple. Surely one equal system is easier to remember and to promote. And a few years ago, I think 4 years ago, council decided to go to the STV, the single transferable vote, which will assist with keeping some balance. And I hear sort of some the takeover that sort of either Clive or Mayor Don have mentioned sort of from one part where the majority of the votes are being held. I would give the electors a bit more credibility. And commenting on that, sort of traveling around the district, there's social media, there's online. We've done a lot of online business with local government in recent 12 to 16 months, 18 months. A lot of that can be done by candidates as well. To attract quality candidates that see the big picture and serve the community at large, having a nimble governance-focused council and community boards that do more of the day-to-day stuff and represent their communities. I mean, there's opportunities for farmers and tourism operators to come involved at a community board level without the time commitments that a council representation requires. They can fit that into a busy day, less travel. Yeah. But the challenge is for the council and elected members to get this message across pre the next election so that we get the right candidates or people that willing to serve. A status quo council with 11 members and increased community board membership will be a recipe for overkill in representation and effective governance. I'm quite sure of that. The Ruapehu Māori Council still exists as well. So elected members serve the district and its residents as a whole, regardless of any creed, belief, ethnicity, profession, or whatever. I'd urge you to go back, or at least strongly consider the original proposal. That was well thought out. It is forward-looking. Let's do away with the us and them, and that is the North and South, and also having a dedicated Māori voice at the table. Don't do away with that. Do away with the North-South, but keep the Māori voice at the table. With the six, I mean, I've been proposing 6+3. That goes for reducing the numbers, being nimble, and it also doesn't even the scales. But 6-3 is a good balance in my view. Yeah, and probably one comment on the having the, and you would have read it, I ranted on about it or raved on about it in my submission. The district boundary is about 6 kilometres north. The proposed north-south boundary is at the top of the Periaka Hill. It really, that split just really breaks up community of its interest in Ofango, Kaitiiki, Ruapehu National Park. There are a lot better options. If a north-south split needs to happen, it may not allow for the math to have the 4-4 split, but at the moment, the way that stands, it will alienate and resent some of those communities. 4-4 on top of the Periaka Hill and the southern side of Kakahi, and then going all the way through the forest that I'm just looking at. That's in the background there in my picture. And I'll finish with some question. Why increase the general councils from 6 to 8? There was, in my opinion, no compelling case during the feedback or consultation. Why split us in North and South? We are all one in the Ruapehu district. And we're all in the same boat and work towards a prospering district for all that call Ruapehu home. Well, thanks for the time and opportunity to present my concerns and feedback, and I'm happy to answer any questions if you may have any.
Well done, Peter. Thank you for that, for those observations. I'll just check my screen. Commissioners, any questions? Commissioner Bigham?
Kia ora, Peter. Thank you for your time this morning. Really appreciated reading your information as well. So he mihi nui, kia ora. I'm just interested in your kōrero around the if the models for a north and a south ward were to proceed, and you're talking about the splits and the delineation for the border. That's the word I'm looking for. Sorry about that. The border between north and south, where that split would happen. I'm just looking at one of the maps that's been supplied to us, and you talked about potential for communities of interest to be alienated. And in this map, I can see quite clearly a township called Kakahi. Is that one of the areas that you're referring to that would be split if the north and south boundary was imposed?
So I looked at the latest maps there that Pauline had supplied to me, which was on the LINS page from the local government, and the southern part of Kakahi will go towards Oakuni in the south. The vast majority will stay with the Taumaniwa or the northern ward. Where I see it more as a problem is actually the area that creates the National Park Community Board, which is basically from the top of the Periaka Hill, takes in all those communities of Ofango, Kaitiiki, Retaruki, Whakahoro, Ruapehu National Park. We're all going south. There are definitely, if a north-south split needs to happen, there are more natural boundaries than the top of the Periaka Hill. Ofango has developed into quite a destination. There's a lot of people living here that work in the district. It's probably predominantly farming, a little bit of tourism, but it's 20 k's north to Taumaniwa, and it's about close to 60. Mayor Don may disagree. I'm not sure. He probably knows it because he drives it all the time. But 60 was okay to Ohakuni Ruapehu. And there's no connection between the local community there. So, but we will be represented by elected general ward councillors in the south. So we've got more of an affinity to the north. And yeah, why do we actually need the boundary? Let's just deal with it as a whole.
Thank you. Thank you, Peter. Just perhaps if we could ask council on the right of reply to give us the rationale for where that boundary actually went and whether or not that border could be shifted more to if the border is to stay in place, whether or not it could be shifted to reflect Peter's concerns about communities of interest being separated from one another.
Question. Commissioner Anea.
Good morning, Peter. Lovely to see you here this morning. I actually haven't got a question for you, but I would just like the council in its right of reply to respond to your statement that you felt that there was a risk of over-governance now with the final proposal. So I'd be very interested in hearing what they have to say about that, because certainly initially it was to reduce the governance numbers and make it more strategic. Thank you.
Peter, my question is in relation to the community boards for which you are currently a participant. Under this model, in fact, you may just bear with me while I go back to your screen. You asked the question around who and how and what processes will be used to appoint councillors to community boards. Will community boards have a decision-making role in this process? I just want to pass that question through to the right of reply so you get a definitive answer on how that process works. So we'll just, I'm pretty sure I know it, but I'd rather hear it from the council. And you've answered my other question where I'd focus, where you've made the observation around the Ofonga village residents being some 21 kilometres beyond the split. So we'll get that boundary question answered in the right of reply as well. I think that would be helpful. Can I summarise by assuming your sense is that if all elected members were at large and you had, don't worry about the number of elected members, but whatever that number is elected at large and 4 strong community boards, in other words, high levels of delegation, you'd be pretty comfortable?
Yeah, I think it is actually, yes, in principle. I think it's quite important to go back that I was at workshops when we sort of discussed and to reduce numbers, and now to end up back at 11 plus, is it 7 in Tamanui Community Board, the Uhuru Community Board, 4 in the National Park, Ofango, and 5. There's a lot of representatives, and then we're back to square one, and we wanted to reduce the number of elected councillors, and 6 plus 3, I think, would be a really good number, especially if it's all big picture, district-wide, that you're not representing sort of a special club or a favoritism. Yeah, so we don't need any boundaries, and I feel the number is quite important because as Commissioner Anea sort of asked, this risk of, in the past we struggled sometimes to get enough candidates for certain community boards. Now with 11 councillors plus that number of community board members, and we only have 13,000 residents over a huge district, geographically it will be a challenge. Maybe less is more and better.
Okay, Commissioner Anea, you have another question?
I have, thank you. I was just wondering, had the council talked in any sort of detail about the increased delegations for community boards? I'm just asking this because you are a board chair.
Well, Obviously, you want to know what's in the sack, sort of. You're not taking the cat in the sack and not knowing what's in it. Pauline earlier mentioned that it is for the new council to decide. I understand there's still a workshop pending in February on the 16th, where between community board members and councillors, we will discuss and brainstorm what this would look like. While legally, the current community boards, we can't hold anyone to account anyway, but the council could make some quite strong recommendations or provide guidance what future delegated authority or increased powers would look like. And if we're all campaigning in the same area now pre the elections and say this is what you're in for if you stand for council, and that is for councillors or community board, then it would be really difficult for an incoming council to totally throw this over the heap and say, oh no, community boards, you just stay in your box where you were, and we'll let you know what we want from you in due course. Sort of a big picture needs to be decided now, what that increased delegated authority would look like, and have a gentleman's agreement on it.
Okay. I think we're done, Peter. Thank you for the presentation and the work that you do, obviously already do as a participant in a community board, and thank you for the observations that you've made.
Thank you all too.
Okay, Penny, we've got one last presentation from Tim Leahy on page 48.
Yes, and I can see that Tim is here with us. Let me just do some of that button pushing that we talk about. Hold on a second. Peter, if I can just ask you, I think there should be a pop-up at your end, just so that you can pop out of the meeting again.
No, there's nothing popped up here.
Well, we've never had one of those before.
No, we haven't. Let me try again. Here we go.
I can mute myself and turn the camera off, but there's no pop-up.
If you want to just leave the meeting and rejoin the same way that you did at the beginning, that's probably the easiest way from our side, if you wouldn't mind.
Okay, I will do that. Thank you, Penny.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
Peter. And hopefully here comes Tim now.
You didn't see that, Don.
Sorry, Brendan, the technology is not really behaving the way that I want it to at the moment.
Ah, funny that. We have had an incredibly smooth run.
Sorry, I'm back in there. Penny, shall I just mute myself and turn the camera off? I want to listen to what Tim has to say.
No, and I appreciate that entirely. Yeah, if you just sit there quietly, we should all be okay. Yeah.
You realise that Tim is between us and a cup of tea.
I do, but I just keep getting the same error code when I'm trying to bring Tim into the meeting. It hasn't happened to us before, and I am struggling to know what it is that we need to do next. Let me just try something different. Hold on a second.
Okay.
Oh, here we go.
Yep, here we go.
Tim, can you hear us?
I can.
Excellent. That's good. Sorry about the delay in bringing you in to join the meeting. Is it possible for you to pop your camera on, do you think?
Now, how would I go about doing that?
That's a very good question. There should be, with a little bit of luck, a button or possibly on the bottom left of your screen.
Yes, I'm using an iPhone. It only gives me the opportunity to disconnect me. I think you may have to listen to me and be deprived of my
Well, that's fine at our end. We
virtual
can hear you very clearly. That's the most important thing. I'll hand over to Brendan
I
now.
can assure you that the view of me was nothing special.
Tim, it's Brendan Duffy here, the chair of the commission. So just welcome aboard, and we're not offended that we can't see you. We can definitely hear you. So we're looking forward to you presenting your observations.
Thank you. Good morning, commissioners, commission staff, your worship, Mayor Don, Clive, Pauline, Candice, long-standing members of local government, Donald and Gavin, and those listening online. Kei te ingoa Tim Leahy aho. My whakapapa is Irish and New Zealand European. My monga is Putawaki. My awa is Tarawera, and my marae is Rautahi. Thank you for the opportunity to submit on my appeal on Council's proposed representation review. I will read my presentation so that I stay on track and do not exceed the allotted time. I firstly submit that my views on this matter are no more nor less important or informed than anyone else's. My credentials include working for the Kawerau District Council as a second-tier officer prior to the 1989 reorganisation of local government, working for the Ruapehu District Council from 1998 to 2019, responsible at different times for IT, finances, risk management and records management, being returning officer, electoral officer, and finally purchaser of electoral services for several local authority and school elections, completing a Master of Business Administration at the University of Waikato in 2010, being president, secretary, administrator, and member of several local organisations, living in Taumarunui and now living on a lifestyle block in Ophong, being a husband, father, and grandfather. My roots are now in this community, and I want to see the governance of local welfare performed well. I would like to express my thanks to the Ruapehu District Council for the excellent work it does every day. We take for granted the mundane things that make modern life so easy. Thank you also to Candice McNaught and the council staff who have had to navigate the tortuous provisions of the Local Electoral Act in providing advice to elected members. My first point is that I support the proposed basis and boundary of community boards. My second point is that I congratulate elected members for proposing the creation of a Ruapehu Māori ward, for which 3 representatives will be elected at large over the whole district. I strongly support this proposal and hope that one day we will progress to an even fairer partnership. Wards. I'm not supportive of the proposal for 2 general wards. The initial proposal was for a single district-wide general ward. I, however, submitted that the existing 4 wards should be retained. I did not contemplate a left field proposal for 2 general wards. I submit that the boundaries for the proposed 2 wards add complexity insofar as there will now be different boundaries for wards, community boards, and rating areas. Rating areas were constructed as part of a rates review process several years ago to avoid any rating impacts from a change in ward boundaries at that time. Another reason is that these proposed 2 wards have not been communicated clearly insofar as they were completely unexpected, and most importantly, they ignore communities of interest. While people in National Park often swing between Taumarunui and Oakuni as town, people in Ophonga have always considered themselves as a wider part of the Taumarunui and district's community. Placing the ward boundary between the North and the South General Wards at the top of the Periaka Hill disenfranchises Ophonga voters, limiting their choice of candidates to only those from the South and denying them the choice of potentially better candidates. The discussion in Candice's report on the agenda for the council meeting of 10 November was comprehensive. The number of submitters for and against the wards issue were, however, insignificant. 14 in favour of a district-wide ward and 29 against. All arguments were well presented in the report. In several places, Candice stated that the reasons for variation from the initial proposal need to be included in the public notice of the proposal. There is, however, no record of the discussions conducted by elected members, nor of the reasons for changes recorded in the minutes of that meeting. There are no public notices listed on Council's website for November or December 2021, Any reasons quoted by staff in any public notice that was undoubtedly printed in a local paper must only have been reasons written by staff and not formally adopted by council. I have not heard any argument today that explains the significant change from the initial proposal for a single general ward. I fail to understand why council took the decision to make this change. Point 3. I submit that 2 general wards is not in the interests of the citizens of Oponga, those others in the north of the district, nor for anyone in the south. It is merely a construct to satisfy the complexities of the local electoral act and perpetuate the existing north-south divide. The next issue is elections at large. Elections for mayor and Ruapehu Maori ward councillors and other councillors should all be at large. Ruapehu Maori ward councillors will be elected using the single transferable vote system, a system promoted as providing a fair basis of election over a large and diverse population. Tribal affiliations in the Ruapehu district are diverse. There are iwi who have little in common with each other, iwi who own huge farming operations, iwi who have settled their Waitangi tribunal claims with the Crown, and those who have not yet even made claims. There is unease around certain issues amongst Maori. Election at large is a fair basis to put those tensions aside and elect the best candidates. The mayor has been elected at large since the creation of the Ruapehu district. Garrick Workman from Rautahi, Weston Curtin from Mananui, Sue Morris from Hikamutu, and Don Cameron from Raurima. The mayor has been elected from all over the district. Why then, given at-large elections for mayor and Ruapehu Maori ward councillors, are elections for other councillors proposed on a 2-ward basis? I submitted that we should keep things as they are with the same wards, 4 Maori ward councillors and 11 general ward councillors. I was impressed by the immense good sense in proposing a single district-wide ward for the election of members of the Ruapehu Maori ward. I am, however, dismayed by the new proposal for 2 general wards with a perverse north-south boundary. Backtracking a bit, in 1989, the Ruapehu district was the leftovers district council in the centre of the North Island. All new district councils around it made sense in terms of communities of interest, but the areas of the Taumarunui County and the Waimarino district had nothing in common, but were not considered viable to be left as separate new district councils. They were forced together into the Ruapehu district. When I joined the council in 1998, the south-north parochialism was palpable. It has waxed and waned over the years, but like most local authorities, there is always a parochial undercurrent. It is time for the final relics of any distrust to be extinguished. It is time for the best representatives to be elected, regardless of their locality. Point 4. I now submit that the same good sense that proposed a district-wide Maori ward be applied to the election of general ward councillors, i.e. that the Commission order a single general ward over the whole of the Ruapehu district as initially proposed. The next issue is the number of councillors. The 2 general ward proposal is so different from the initial reorganisation proposed that I feel I can justifiably change my position on the number of councillors. We live in challenging times. People are presently transfixed by COVID-19 and the 3 waters reform, and yet the threats of climate change, biodiversity decline and soil loss are treated superficially. Our people need to be informed by councillors they know and trust. We need examples to follow. Council has achieved very little apart from commissioning advice and choosing a greenhouse gas footprint methodology. It must change its behaviour to set an example and encourage others to change. We need big thinkers around the council table. We need day-to-day governance delegated to community boards and the council focusing on strategy and policy. Council's initial proposal, expanding the responsibilities of community boards, aimed at providing a better connection to our unique localised communities of interest. Staff that I have questioned on the change to delegated operations to community boards cannot provide any detail on how this will work. and have said that this matter will be considered by the new council. I accept that delegating operations is not one on which the Commission can rule, but the uncertainty could certainly mislead candidates. I would not want to stand for a council on the basis of focusing on strategy and policy to find that I was bogged down with operational matters that, in my view, are better governed more locally. Point 5. I choose, perhaps naively, to trust that the intention to delegate operations to community boards will come about. And on that basis, I submit that a smaller team of councillors is needed for strategy and policy. I submit that 3 members be elected from the Ruapehu Maori ward, and that a number of members be elected from the Ruapehu General Ward that is proportional to the total registered voters, that is 8 members. In summary, please amend the final representation review so that the proposal for 2 general wards be rescinded. There is a single general ward over the whole of the Ruapehu district, and that 8 members be elected from the Ruapehu General Ward. Thank you for listening, and I'm happy to answer your questions, and I must apologise for going a minute or so over time.
You don't need to apologise, Tim. It took us more than a minute to get you loaded in, so there's no problem. Thank you very much. I wouldn't mind getting a copy of that, of your observations. Have we got can we do that, Penny? EJ?
Yes, we can. If
Please.
Tim is willing to email them through, he should have a contact email address for Lee Carter, who would have been in touch with him before today.
No problem,
Tim,
I can send them to Lee.
That would be useful, if you don't mind. That would be great. So just checking in with commissioners to see if there's any points of clarity, any questions from either of the commissioners. And while they'll, yes, Commissioner Bigham.
Apologies, I was trying to find my raise hand button. Thank you, Tim, for your comprehensive kōrero with us today. More a question from the council in response to Tim's discussion points around the rationale for 2 wards not being fully publicised to the community. If you could have a response for that for this afternoon, that would be appreciative. Especially around the point of there seems to be no rationale provided to the public for the reintroduction of those 2 wards.
That's good, because that was one of my questions. So Commissioner Anir, are you good?
I'm good, thank you.
Okay. So I think the important point here, Tim, is that from your original observations to your now revised position on the number, I've got that well and truly noted. And of course, you're absolutely right. That's your prerogative to change as the process occurs. And can you? Right. So my question in the right of reply is, and still in relation to this boundary, this north-south split, and I've not heard this one before. You said there's confusion in the boundaries, and you included rating areas. Now, I'm not as clear as maybe I could be or should be in terms of rating areas. So it might be useful to understand what that actually means in terms. So we've got the north-south split. We've got commentary around communities being split. There's commentary around that doesn't line up with rating areas. And then I'm still going to go back to the livability study, because that's all about localism. So I'm trying to tie this up so I'm really, really clear about, you know, the strength of the arguments around whether or not that the 2 general ward split is actually in the right place. So we'll have a bit of a look at that if we can in the right of reply. Right, I think that, so Tim, we've picked up the key points. I don't think there's any other specific questions to you. You've clearly articulated your perspective. So we thank you, Tim.
Thank you very much.
Right, so we've gone, as is usual, slightly over time, but we're not worried about that. It's just on 11 o'clock. We need a half-hour break, I think. Yep. Do you need longer, Don? So are you guys all right? Half an hour's enough? Rightio. Okay, so let's reconvene at 11:30 for right of, oh, yeah, well, let's reconvene at 11:30, 25 minutes. And we'll go for right of reply there. Okay, so we'll adjourn now, reconvene at 11:30. You'll do whatever you need to do, Penny.
I will, yes. Our live stream will continue running, so if everyone can just pop themselves on mute and switch their cameras off, we'll be away.
It all works. Sorry about that phone up thing. I miss it every time, but anyway, we're all good.
I forgot as well.
It's not compulsory.
Thank you, EJ. Got that email.
All good.
Kia ora, commissioners. You've got a bit on at the moment.
You know when to bail out.
Oh, I couldn't possibly comment.
Oh gosh. Yes, it's a bit busy at the moment, Gavin.
Yeah, indeed.
Lovely sunny spot at your place by the look of it.
Just I had to pull the curtains, cut out the sun.
Now we're going for time. Where are they? Slightly difficult to start without the local authority being in attendance.
It is only just dead on start time, and they
Well,
do only
it's
have
start time.
25 minutes.
It is start time. Here we go.
Penny, I can't make myself visible.
Okay, Donald, I'll just push a button at this end.
You're not a figment of our imagination, Donald.
Try that now, Donald. And the only other thing to check, Donald, is in the nicest possible way, have you got your laptop open?
Did that so nicely, Penny.
Oh, dear.
Oh, I've done that before too.
We go.
With that modicum of embarrassment, we'll reconvene and welcome you, Mayor Don, for your right of reply.
Thank you, Chair. Look, we'll go in order of the right of reply questions. Number one, perception that Māori ward representatives just for Māori rather than to represent the entire district. Certainly amongst Maori, that's not the perception at all. It was made very clear from the time we started talking with them that each person would be representing the whole district. Not forgetting that when we first started talking with Māori, it was around 2 members representing the whole district. And that in itself I would present a problem, and that you're looking at multi-iwi, multi-hapu. It was actually a hapu that reminded us around making sure it's district-wide. Yes, and then we moved from 2 to 3. That came out very clearly early on in the submissions. Why did we not go to 4? Simply we felt that to get to 4, you're increasing the council from 8 plus 4. We felt it was over governance at that stage. What is the rationale for proposed north-south boundary? Look, the rationale around the boundaries, there's always been a problem for us around setting that north-south boundary. Sorry? Okay, that north-south boundary, and perhaps Pauline can explain why. It has always been a problem, but what it does do, it ensures that the community board wards are clearly defined. Do you want to?
Yes, through the chair. The boundary is exactly the same as the current ward boundary and current national park boundaries. We did not change that boundary from the last at least 3 elections where that boundary's been sitting in the same place. The small number of people in the area in terms of our population always made that boundary a very tricky boundary. And moving it south of that boundary would immediately start impacting your plus or minus 10%. And you would end up having to have, if we went with 8, you would have to have a 5-3 split. We were trying to keep it a 4-4 or 3-3 split by having the boundary in that place. So, and on that, we don't have any rating areas anymore. That was historic. We removed the rating areas at least 6 years ago from memory. So they haven't played any part in our rate, and that was a rating issue anyway. They haven't played any part in our rating for a long time now. So yes, so the boundary has not changed. It's exactly the same as it has been for both wards. It was a National Park Taranui ward boundary, and it's the same boundary now for north-south.
I think the numbers quoted weren't exactly right from the submissions. I gathered from the north-south one, it was something like 37 submissions.
There was, against at large, we had 37 submissions against it, and we had 10 submissions for it. So those are the numbers from our submission spreadsheet.
And that's about the same balance with online comments.
Yes, yeah, we had a lot of online comments against the at large as well.
Yeah. Do you want to ask any more around that boundary? Okay. A risk of overgovernance for the final proposal moving back to a council of 11. I can say this quite easily because I'm not standing for the next election. I don't think there is a risk. When I look at the work coming through, that is going to add on to council. So we've heard already speakers saying that we're not taking enough account of climate change, environmental issues. Yes, that's probably true, but we're just starting that journey, and obviously our livability study is taking that into account anyway, because people are bringing that up. I do see local government work increasing dramatically for this council in particular. And the other thing is that persuaded us was when we looked at the number of councillors retiring, we're losing quite a large number of those who've been on for a long time, with a lot of historical knowledge and also are very well bound to the community. The feeling was that probably we need to get that numbers up to balance those that have been lost. I wouldn't be surprised that in 6 years' time you may review that, but for the size of the district, we do need a number of councillors to actually balance out the amount of work that's going to. We don't have committees, by the way. We expect councillors to be, to understand what's going across the whole district. And increasing, the other part was that we felt removing the ward committee and making that a community board for Tomarui. We are adding more elected members to it, but actually that area needs it, because the one thing that we spoke about when we looked at the north-south boundary and also added that north-south boundary, rural representation has been foundering. We believe, and after listening to the Federated Farmers submission, we felt that putting the boundary back, north-south boundary, and adding on Tomarui as a community board allows rural people to put their hand up. Anything else you want to add to that? Oh, and with Ohura, yes, sorry. Just to make sure that you understand, we looked at Ohura being a community board, the fourth community board. We had no submissions in support of that. And Commissioner Duffy, you may remember going way back, Ohura actually voted themselves to remove their community board, and that hasn't, their view has not changed. They are well represented by our Ohura councillor at this stage. Who, how, and what processes will be used to appoint councillor appointees to community boards? Will community boards play any role in this process? Yes, they will, because this is coming up our workshop with them anyway. But the councillors themselves were quite keen to reduce the councillor numbers on the community board. We generally have 2 down in Waimarino, to reduce that to 1. That, I think, makes the community boards far more comfortable, particularly now we're talking about giving them more a budget and a bit more work. They would like to think that they are capable of doing that without having interference from council. That was made pretty plain to us. Was the rationale for North-South wards explained in the council's final proposal of public notice? Yes, it was. Pauline can probably show you, but it was put out very, very clearly with quite a lot of information attached to that. And what else was there?
Yes, it was to, we say in the notice that it was to reflect the communities of interest.
Yep. Yep. And as it was, we added to that is also reflecting the communities of interest that came back to us. So we felt, yes, they were well informed. How are community boards and rating areas related?
That was the one that they've
discontinued. They just continue that. So yeah. That's not, that is no longer a thing we've got anything to do with. Yes, so look, when I think back at the workshops we had, we covered all this, and Gavin, I have to say, was a great part of those discussions, because what we try to do is you've always got to be careful with public submissions. Yes, we had 37, but there are people that just don't bother coming to submissions. And we did ask councillors to get out and about and listen, and I think they did that pretty well. That's one thing they do very well, actually, I have to say. And so when we came up to the final proposal, it was one we felt was well balanced between council's wishes, community board wishes, and the public's wishes.
Before we finalise, can I make a comment when we come back to
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, if I could just comment, I think some of the comments early on was also about why did we not discuss 4 Maori seats on it. So I thought what the Mayor has just described is a council that I'm really proud of the council in this process. They were very open-minded, trying to reflect what the community was wishing. So when we had our meetings, it was with 6 councillors, and the maximum number you could have at that time was 3. So 4 was never an option in those early discussions. So it wasn't that we were not, because you could have been implied that we were avoiding that discussion. It was never an option. It was only when council, again listening to the community, when they said, look, you're cutting back council too much with all those bigger issues, you need a few more. which is when it went to 6 to 8. That was when it suddenly became possible to have 4, but that was quite late in the process. So it wasn't that it was not discussed, it just wasn't possible. So where we are now, though, if we add on another one, then we're actually increasing the council size to what we have at the moment. And again, there was no appetite to increase the council size. So we originally wanted to reduce, which is where the 6 and the 2 came from. It was then increased to 3, an acknowledgement that we wanted the maximum number of Murray, wards that we could have. But to add another one now would actually go, in our view, against the original wishes, which is increasing the size of council. So I think where we've landed, it does reflect the submissions that we've got to it. And as far as the 2 ward split, because of our, as has been explained, because our rural areas have very little population in it, it is impossible to put a boundary in the right place and meet your 10%. So we're not trying to defend whether that line is more logical. It just physically was impossible to have a 2 ward system anywhere else effectively. So we did initially say to go at large, but again, it was one step too far for our community and for our councillors. So we compromised by proposing the 2 wards. I feel if you impose the at large, which is the logical thing to do, it may be one step too far for the community that have submitted. We're obviously at liberty to do that, but that was, listening to our community, they were very nervous about going to a totally at large process, even though the system should allow for it. But I'll come back to the mayor now.
Oh, no, look, I think, thank you, Clive. I think you've probably wrapped things up fairly well. I think the important thing is that, as Clive mentioned, is that we held quite a lot of workshops around this, which we haven't done before. One criticism we did have initially was that we didn't bring community boards in right from the start. My thought, and this is my personal thought, and I impose my thought, unfortunately, was that we've got to get council's minds around this first. It is so complex. And when we started our workshop, everyone was all over the shop. They just did not understand how mesh blocks worked and how you could, and communities of interest, things like that. It just wasn't in their rationale at all. But once we got through that, and we are really lucky that Pauline's had a head around this for many, many years, then you could see some clear thinking starting to come out of this. And that included, which I think community boards were quite surprised about, was community boards are an absolutely essential part of our governance, but we need to give them some more work. I think that actually caught them on the hop because they felt perhaps they're going to be kept as they are, or even the debate will be to get rid of them. So yeah, I think we did as good as we could do, and thinking into the future, we believe that we're pretty well balanced council as we went out with the final proposal to tackle anything that's coming along into the future.
Okay.
Can I just make one final point around the boundary? It's actually been in place for 3 elections. That boundary has not moved for 3 elections. So that's at least 9 years that boundary's been in the same place. That's, so it's not new.
No, it's not. No.
Just one observation, not that we can consider it, but you'd made the comment about losing long-standing elected members, and that's, it's not something, as I say, that we would want, that we can adjudicate over. That's just the reality. But I just wonder, as you've made that statement, where you're giving a sense that there is going to be in your mind, by the sound of it, an impact in terms of institutional knowledge. It makes you wonder whether an 8-4 split gives you that extra level of comfort around getting the skills that are necessary.
Yeah, certainly, because
I think to be fair, there was no wish from council or the community to increase the size of governance. In fact, so I think that's always been on our mind. I think we'd have been seen as irresponsible if we increased the numbers of governors. Not in the community boards, I think there was people accepted that, but actually increasing the number of councillors, I don't think we'd have had any support to do that.
Rightio. So I'll just double check from fellow commissioners. Are you good? Are you done? Commissioner Biggins happy. Commissioner Anea happy. Okay. All right. So that concludes the formalities of the process. You'll appreciate that the commission now has a responsibility of going away and deliberating. And as we all know, that by an early date in April, we have to have all of this resolved. So we've got quite as you would appreciate, quite a challenge on our hands. Can I say on behalf of the Commission to you, Mayor Don, and to Clive as said, thank you so much for the effort that you've put in to the preparation. Pauline, we should acknowledge you in the back room as well, because that's where the real grunt happens. But I don't know that that's reflected often enough. So back to you and your team. Thanks for the serious piece of work that's gone on there. That is genuinely appreciated and acknowledged. And I just acknowledge you, Gavin, as an advisor through to Ruapehu. Thanks for the work that's gone on there. And really all that occurs now is for us to formally close with our karakia, and then we will go away and carry out our deliberations. So if I could pass over to Commissioner Bigham to close us with our karakia.
Tēnā rā koe, I te tia mana, tēnā hoki koutou o te kaunihira o Ruapehu, nui te mihi kia koutou. Thank you all again for your wonderful efforts today and helping to keep cognizant in our minds the considerations that you've undertaken. Really appreciate your time. And this karakia is called Unuhia, and it's just really about wrapping up all the thoughts and all the processes and all the deliberations and kōrero that we've had today, frees us up and allows us to go into the rest of our day with open minds and open hearts to tackle whatever comes next. So you're more than welcome to join us at this time. Unuhia, 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 unuhia I te urutapu nui, kia wātea, kia māma te ngākau, te tinana, te wairua I te arataka tū. Koia rā e rongo, whakairia ake ki runga, kia wātea, aira, kua wātea, hau, pai mārire. Kia ora tātou.
Kia ora.
Kia ora.
Thank you, Anita.